deep in the heart of Texas. It's a place where the beloved Texas Rangers were one strike away from winning the 2011 World Series. Then David Freese happened, and you know the rest is history. And who could forget this heartbreaking double overtime loss to the, I've gotta say it, the Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. Okay, I'll get the St. Louisan out of me and we'll get back on topic. On the NASCAR side of things, the Lone Star State has been represented by two Hall of Famers, Bobby and Terry Labonte. Brother Terry was the most successful, winning 2 championships and 22 races. That included an elite stretch with one of the most widely recognized paint schemes in the Corn Flakes design. Then, as the ketchup and mustard colors were swiped for stripes in 2001, so did the competitiveness of the Texas veteran. This is the downfall of Terry Labonte. To begin this story, we must first begin with the late 1990s. As Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin were trading punches on the racetrack, Terry Labonte was still among one of the best drivers on the tour. Albeit at the gray age of 43, the elite Corn Flakes era was unfortunately coming to an end. 2 years removed from his championship, he was still winning races, including a big win at the Texas Motor Speedway. Yet that Lone Star victory in 1999 marked as his only top 5 on the season. It was a rather regressive season, marking as his first points finish outside the top 10 in his HMS tenure. In that time period, I would say his most memorable moments, however, came on the historical side. He was the decorated Iron Man on the circuit after passing a mark the King set during his career. In 1998, Texas Terry made NASCAR history in the deserts of Arizona after making his 600th consecutive Cup Series start. Even as a shell of who he once was as a racer, that streak was solidly going into the new millennium and keeping him into the public eye. Then during the summer of 00, the Iron Man was banged up horribly following a sequence of crashes. He fractured his right shin following a wreck during the Pepsi 400. 1 week later at New Hampshire, another collision further worsened these injuries. Terry Labonte was relieved by Rich Bickle at Pocono just to keep the streak alive, but unfortunately a demise was inevitable. Labonte elected to sit out both Indianapolis and Watkins Glen, thus ending a streak dating all the way back to January 14, 1979. Texas Terry would not start a NASCAR Cup Series race. Now while it broke a 21-year run, this was the right decision for his health. Plus, if we're being honest, it's not like he had a chance to win the 2000 championship. I mean, 743 points back in mid-July is mere impossible to make up considering the old Winston format. After grinding every week for 2 decades, Labonte deserved the rest to come back stronger and in a much better mental state. Returning to the pavement, Labonte only netted 1 top 10 finish, but honestly his performance wasn't that horrible in my opinion. In fact, he gained 3 positions to end the year out in 17th. That included a young teammate Jerry Nadeau in the 25, who competed in all 34 events. As younger brother Bobby hoisted the Cup trophy in Atlanta, Terry set his sights past an adversity-filled 2000 and on to the future. The second campaign under the new century would consist of the same competitive core. The 5-team remained intact, with Hendrick Motorsports continuing to field 3 fast Chevrolet Monte Carlos. The only change relied with the DuPont paint booth. Kellogg shifted their NASCAR branding from Corn Flakes, thus introducing one of my all-time childhood paint schemes. The blue and orange Tony the Tiger design was one you just couldn't miss on TV or of course watching from the grandstands. This would be the second phase for Kellogg's and their NASCAR sponsorship, the one I like to call the Frosted Flakes Era. You figured with the amount of wins, championships, and heritage of the Corn Flakes era, you figured the Frosted Flakes would be that and then some. Unfortunately, starting on the beaches of Daytona, disappointment would be one of the words characterizing the Frosted Flakes era. Let's start out with 2001. Instead of sticking to the breakfast, early bird gets the worm motto, the Kellogg's team slogged behind the competition all season long. Really, the woe started once the team unloaded on Friday afternoon. Terry Labonte struggled immensely during time trials. With the same engines Jeff Gordon won 6 pole positions with, Labonte had an average starting position of 30.8. It was fairly common to see the 2-time champ rely on provisionals just to make the 43-car field. And then of course, once they got to the race, the whole year was plagued by crashes and countless mechanical failures. The 5-team failed to finish 8 races, marking as Labonte's highest DNF rate since his days in the 14. Another doomful statistic was that Labonte failed to lead a single lap in the newly expanded 36-race campaign. That marked the first time in HMS history a full-time driver had failed to lead a circuit out front. Without a doubt, the once championship core had completely lost its magic. Typically the first change you see after a bad season, Terry Labonte would receive a new crew chief for 2002. Gary Dehart, the mastermind that resurged Labonte's career at Hendrick, would step off the box. His role shifted to the research and development team at HMS, which would open the door for Jim Long to become the crew chief. Now, his tenure beforehand was rather mediocre, but he carried the experience and he knew the ins and outs of developing a fast race car. This was needed to hopefully provide a quick rebuild and become competitive once again. In terms of Hendrick Motorsports, they expanded their Cup program to now 4 full-time entries. Obviously, more cars means more resources, and it could create some growing pains within the organization. Now, in the grand scheme of things, 2002 was a season of small victories. I'll give Labonte credit, he used less provisionals and he led 11 laps on the season. The mini rebuild was doing alright after exiting the yard of bricks after a 13th place finish propelled Labonte to 17th in the good old WINSTON standings. However, Texas Terry would follow that up with not so Texas results, earning only one more top 20 finish to close out the campaign. That second half collapse dropped him to 24th in points, which was his lowest mark as a full-time Cup racer. And this is all while Jeff Gordon and breakout sensation Jimmie Johnson won 3 races each and placed top 5 in points. Honestly, at this point, you could say Labonte was riding out the final years of his contract. Then the unthinkable happened, at least for a driver the age of Terry Labonte. Without any visible changes to the public eye, Terry Labonte had a resurgent 2003. That's right, there was a 180 in performance right in the middle of Labonte's downfall. For one thing, Fast Friday was a lot better for the 5 team. Less sub-30th place starting positions meant for better pit stall selection and a few rows ahead of the eye of the storm. Terry Labonte also cut back massively on his DNF rate. Once a driver among the bottom 5 in races at the finish, Labonte completed all 36 races. Yet the most memorable moment most fans remember is this. During the final Labor Day Southern 500 for the foreseeable future, Terry Labonte led 33 laps. At the same venue he claimed career win number 1, Labonte ended a 156 race winless drought without visiting victory lane. It was a Texas-sized victory for Labonte's career, and it was great to see that beautiful Frosted Flakes car in victory lane. To wrap things up on 2003, he gained some hardware, netted more top 5s and top 10s, and placed inside the top 10 in points. This season was his best showing since 1999. The veteran mastered new tricks, and he gave the Frosted Flakes era a breath of fresh air. As for 2004, Jim Long returned as crew chief. Kellogg's returned for year 12 with Labonte, and the veteran was as motivated as ever. The only change relied with NASCAR as a new points format was implemented to crown a season champion. Concluding race 26, 10 drivers would advance for a 10-race fight for the Nextel trophy. Unfortunately, Terry Labonte did not earn those stripes in 2004. The 5 team reverted back to a lot of the same issues from 2001 to 2002, seeing a 180 in performance the other way. A lack of horsepower, poor starting positions, and of course mechanical failures. Now, to Labonte and the 5 team's credit, the scale at Hendrick Motorsports was fairly lopsided in 2004. Jeff Gordon and Jimmie Johnson were championship contenders and combined to win 13 races. Terry Labonte and newcomer Brian Vickers, meanwhile, combined for 10 top 10 finishes. Now, this was one season before the 5 and 25 teams moved to another shop, but possibly changes were made a season early. Anyways, the 5 team entered September far eliminated from playoff contention, and far from a weekly contender. That retrogression sparked the 26-year pioneer to make a critical decision on his NASCAR future. Terry Labonte announced his retirement from full-time racing. He stated that full-time racing wasn't appealing to him anymore. Now honestly, this was definitely understandable as the 36 race tour is truly a grind. I would think the poor results sealed the deal on Labonte's commitment. Taking over the 5-car valued prospect Kyle Busch was primed for a cup ride, and he would race that Kellogg's car in 2005. A new driver and crew chief in Alan Gustafson meant a new era was on the horizon. Kellogg's Racing would use this to shift its NASCAR marketing, introducing the neon yellow era for Kyle's rookie season. Tony the Tiger remained, but the Frosted Flakes colors and logos would be phased out, and thus it meant the doomful era was coming to an end. The final chapter to the Frosted Flakes era and Terry Labonte's career came on November 21st, 2004. While Jimmie Johnson suffered the heartbreak of losing the championship, Terry Labonte went largely unnoticed. The 47-year-old limped across the finish line in 31st, 7 laps off the pace. And honestly, that was largely on par with this era. Staying on course, there were more career lows engraved on this early 2000s stretch. Labonte not only finished a career low 26th in points, but he never finished inside the top 5. The last time this occurred, Morgan Shepherd was a competitive driver on the Cup circuit. This was definitely a depressing farewell season, and far from the season Jeff Gordon would have 11 seasons later. As for Labonte's relationship with Kellogg's and HMS, that would continue into 2005. Terry Labonte's half-retired, half-race car driver tour would see some crazy endeavors spanning a couple different teams and manufacturers. I'd say this topic is definitely worth creating a video on, possibly in the foreseeable future. In the end, Terry Labonte's demise was a mixture of age, never being the same driver he was after his big wreck, and constant inconsistencies with his race team and HMS. Part of me thinks Terry Labonte should have just retired from full-time competition after 2003. Joe Nemechek possibly gets the 5 car, while Brian Vickers moves up with GMAC to the 25. Maybe that sparks more life into the Frosted Flakes era, but Nemechek didn't exactly excel in his HMS tenure. Either way, the Frosted Flakes number 5 will go down as one of the greatest paint schemes of all time, well, at least in my opinion. As for Terry Labonte's career, while it was the scheme of his final win, it will mostly symbolize the dark and downward spiral of a NASCAR champion. So anyways, this is NRF signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.